Hi there again. I'm Robert Worstall. This is day 2, my transformation. It's a 365-day project. We're covering Go Thunk Yourself book series. And to really understand it, when I started going over this, I said, you know, what we have to do is go back to the beginning of this thing. In the paperback version, about page 146, it has the actual paper that I wrote. I did about 2 years of research, wrote a paper on it. This ended up being a master's paper, but I included it in the book so you could understand the whole background of everything. See, I started off with the point of I didn't really understand. After 20 years as a counselor, I didn't understand for myself that self-help worked. So I had to figure out if self-help worked, my logic on this was that you had a system underlying it for it to work for anybody. Anybody should be able to make self-help work, write books, tapes, etc. And there had to be a system. Well, the only way to figure out if there's a really system to it is you had to take the characters out of it, the charismatic individuals that were the cult leaders and so on, right? You had to put those aside and find stuff that actually worked. To my mind, it would be bestseller books. Books that were written and are still successful way after the author was dead. And then it has no influence by the guy's own charisma to getting everything sold, right? Because his sales would actually say, here's what actually working. So I said, okay, what are the all-time bestsellers in self-help in books? Because, you know, 100 years ago, we didn't have DVDs or even tape recorders, much less TV. So that was the datum. Best-selling books whose authors were dead, right? So I looked around and I went through Amazon and all these different online searches which had lists of books and narrowed them down to a handful of books, which were these authors: James Allen, As a Man Thinketh; Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People; George Clausen, Richest Man in Babylon; a guy named Al-Ghazali, The Alchemy of Happiness; Charles F. Handel, Master Key System; Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich; Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking; Wallace Wattles, The Science of Getting Rich. Now, after studying these, I then compared to more modern books to see if anything approached sales records and workability, right, without having, you know, but mainly it's the sales records, because these guys, each of these took a huge bite out of the total book market at the time they were being published, when they were bestsellers, right? Some of them, like Napoleon Hill, continues to sell outrageous numbers. There's one book that I found that fit these studies of these books. That was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Right, there's one other book that I missed that I found later after the book was published called Secretum Secretorum, which was supposedly Aristotle talking to a young Alexander, telling him the secrets of the universe. And this thing was actually a bestseller before the printing press, much like Al-Ghazali, but before the printing press, and they used to have to hand copy each one of these books to get, and then would sell them, you know, but they'd be all parchment. So they went to the rich and famous. But this was a was a bestseller for something like 500 years. And that's on my Lulu site if you want to look it up. But that was just as a note. This is how comprehensive this list is and how few people actually made these bestsellers. But let's get down to these things. Now, that was the basic line of this, and I was just about to tell you all the points that I made that made these bestsellers, but that all takes a day by itself that we'll cover into these 14 points that I settled on. And like just today, I was reviewing this again, and I was going, you know, there would be one other point to add, which would be focus. And it's covered somewhat, and a lot of these books actually do cover that. But again, we're jumping the gun. We'll get into that tomorrow. The main thing is I wanted to tell you about these stories. This is the name of the paper, The Search for an Underlying Core System Behind Bestsellers, Self-Help Bestsellers. And these are the authors, right? I've reproduced most of these books because they're in the public domain. I've been able to republish most of these books on the site Norman Vincent Peale does not have a copyright, and so we didn't go there. But the rest of them are available. I don't think I've got Al Ghazali up there. James Allen's book actually shows up in the back of Go Thunk Yourself. But I thought this was interesting to review this thing in a new unit of time. We have, and there's a lot to it. The paper didn't cover it in very much detail, and that's why it required a whole book by itself for each book. And we'll be covering each point as we go in this book, as I restudy it and find more data about it. And hopefully I'll put even more data on the blog and in my curated content blog, so we can get more data on it. But I wanted to bring you up to the point that if you're going to study this book, come along with me on this journey, that read this paper, go crack the back first and read the paper that it's professorial. That's academic speech, you know. But in the rest of the book, thank God, was a lot more direct and straightforward. But I want to let you know that this is where we start. We start with these authors. We start with the paper in the middle of the book. And then we'll come back to, after we lay the foundation, we'll come back and study each point by themselves, right? And then after that is after that, but we'll get into this thing. Anyway, I just want to encourage you to join in this journey. This is where we start, and this is the basis of it. Thanks again.